Welcome back as we enter now into the forest ecosystem, and you'll notice that this ecosystem is a lot different to the woodlands ecosystem. It's a lot cooler climate, the canopy structure is a lot more denser and the trees grow a lot more higher, but therefore the biodiversity of edibles that you'll find within this ecosystem is a lot more. Within this ecosystem, you'll find a lot of beautiful little ravines, and within those ravines is where you'll find the most diversity of plants and mushrooms. Look at the symbiotic relationships between the fungi and the different types of trees, and also looking at some indigenous plants as well. Within the forest ecosystems, underneath the fallen pine trees and underneath pine trees growing, you'll generally find this mushroom is what they call the saffron milkcap or the pine ring. And it's actually a very delicious mushroom. A key indicator of this mushroom, the pine ring, when you cut it, this should have a hollow stem, and then when handling with your hands, the exterior should turn like a green. The milk itself obviously changes to a deep red wine color, and this color does not change. A good indicator from obviously your jack-o'-lanterns, which generally has a gill set that runs all the way up to the base down to the root, which is poisonous. So the pine ring mushroom is something that everybody eats and everybody knows within the Western Cape and South Africa, and it's a nice thing to eat within this time of season. But like with all wild mushrooms, when you're harvesting, eat a little bit at a time, cook it thoroughly, and also don't mix wild mushrooms when you're cooking them, because each mushroom has a different effect on people. So to keep it safe, a little bit first, and then obviously cook it and do not mix it. This is another fantastic find. This is another type of wild asparagus, full of thorns. You've got to catch them obviously in the midwinter when they shoot the new shoot from the center. Absolutely stunning. It's wild, it's indigenous. You just got to know where to look. But if you look at it versus a commercial, basically the profile of the plant looks exactly the same. The new shoots you pick off, and obviously you need to take these little spikes off. But always look in the center of the bush and you'll find the best new shoots to pick for your own homemade asparagus.
This is another tree, and it's a low-growing tree that you'll find in the water systems within the forest ecosystem. It's known as the wild almond or the bitter almond. It looks very similar to our almond that we would recognize, which we would eat on an everyday basis. The thing about this almond in itself, the nut within itself is actually toxic, and there's a way of purifying this by putting it into a bag into the streams, and that's what the locals used to do in the old days. The quite interesting fact of the symbiotic relationship that they like growing next to water streams, which gives it an opportunity for you to have a source to purify the nut in order to eat it, which is quite an important thing. So this is a mushroom that every single chef seems to prize, and when everybody thinks about wild mushrooms, this is one mushroom that they all look for. And this is what they're known as Boletus edulis, penny bun, or porcini. The mushroom within itself has a dark brown cap, and as it ages, the underpores goes from white to green to darker shades to almost a brown. The thing with these mushrooms, you've got to catch them early, and this is the best stage to harvest them. This mushroom is prized by squirrels and also all ground rodents, and they tend to enjoy it. The purpose of these mushrooms is they're ectomycorrhizal, so they work with the plant root systems in order to process the decomposing matter to food to be uptaken by the plants. That's a symbiotic relationship here within nature with them. When you find one, you've got to look around, you'll probably find a few more, but a very highly prized mushroom for you to eat. The ways to find this mushroom, you generally got to look by certain species of trees, and generally like hardwood species of trees of chestnut, oak, and underneath the leaves they generally tend to pop up. When harvesting these penny buns, the best thing to do is to obviously have a knife with you and have a good brush. You want to look at the base of the mushroom, and you want to cut just at the base. And generally what a lot of foragers do, there's generally a lot of bite marks that happen at the bottom of the mushroom. They'll take the mushroom and they'll just clean off the edges like this. Just give it a beautiful finish. And have a beautiful penny bun mushroom. The lovely thing about the porcini mushroom is that it has such a beautiful earthy aroma. And when you're actually looking for them, you're actually going to smell them quite easily, which will actually lead you to obviously the leaves that they'll be growing underneath. That's the important thing as well. When you see little tufts of leaves just generating, pushing up, is a good indicator that you're very close to finding some porcinis. So mushroom foragers' general rule to not pick predators with the red spore and bruising blue. Take a knife, cut it down the center, and if it bruises blue, it's generally not safe to consume those. This reaction is caused by variegated acids that react with the oxygen when it's exposed, making it turn blue. Getting out this time of the year is a fantastic time, especially with the family, with the porcinis out, that nutty, earthy aroma. It's one of those really prized edibles that you can get out and go look for, like a bit of a treasure hunt.
So as we're in the forest ecosystem, there's some low-growing plants that you'll find in the little sun patches, and this one in particular is called Diosporus vitea, which is known as the bladder nut. The bladder nut within itself is a seed pod that contains 4 seeds inside of it. As they age, the pods start changing to a deeper, darker brown, bluish color, and the seeds go into a red and a brown color too. When you open up the capsule, you look at it, it's very similar to what we look at as what we call like a gooseberry. But the nut within itself is very hard, and it's got an outer sheath which you pop, and you have 4 seeds inside which pop out too. These seeds now obviously are edible, but they are very bitter. It's not something I really enjoy eating, so if you're really desperate for something to eat as a snack, at a later stage, when these obviously dry out, they get a dark color and resemble a coffee bean, and can be roasted and then ground up and then made into a coffee and into a brewed drink.
Okay, yeah, in the conifer plantations in the Western Cape, this mushroom just tends to pop up in the early autumn. And a lot of people that are foraging the mushroom is one of the easiest identifiable ones. And it's a good beginner's choice to start foraging looking for mushrooms. However, it's not a very choice prized edible, like the rest of the mushrooms you'll find within the same ecosystem. One thing about this mushroom is easy to identify. If you look at the cap, it's got a beautiful purple pink color. So it's very unique to this. This is called Drusilla capensis. And the older they get, they start blooming up, and the squirrels and the insects start eating off the sides. And that's a good indication that this is a very nice tasting one, because generally with certain species of Drusilla mushrooms, they become very spicy, and it's generally those you want to stay away from because they give you a bad reaction. There are hundreds of different types of species of the Drusilla, but this one called capensis meaning from the Cape. So to harvest this mushroom, you want to go at the base of the mushroom, and you want to cut the mushroom off. You'll notice underneath there, the spore print of this mushroom is generally white to a light yellow. So those one are identified by spore prints. This indicates to look for any bruising on this mushroom. You won't have any bruising on this mushroom, but insects, slugs, generally tend to enjoy them in the later stage of their life, and they get eaten up. This one in particular has been eaten by a little squirrel underneath here, and you can see all the little bite marks, and also from the field elephant shrews and the forest shrews that run around here. The best time to find these is obviously when they're a little bit younger. It's a lot better, it's easier to cook with, and these gills are also very brittle as well. You'll feel them and they just easily break off. You see, you get down to this skin. A lot of people as well with these mushrooms would also peel the skin off, and you can do that like this, but like I said before, these gills are also very, very, very brittle. And I generally say a lot of the stuff that reacts with your body generally comes from the skin. So as a safety precaution, a lot of people would peel that skin off and then start eating the mushroom. Top composition of this mushroom is entirely gills, so there's not much meat in the top. So by peeling the skin off like this, you're removing some of that peppery taste and those possible toxins in there that's going to react with your body. There you get a vertical mushroom. And these you can just break up into sections and you fry like that. most tastiest things you'll find, obviously driving through the Fynbos, is these lovely fiddleheads. It comes from a specific type of fern, which is an ostrich fern, and the ostrich fern has a singular leaf which branches out to that. And you pick the top tips, they are so delicious. You cook them in a bit of butter and you get such a nutty aroma out of them, nutty flavour.
Forager's trick is to obviously identify edible ferns, is to run your finger up the base of the stem. If it's hollow, generally it's edible. If it's flat, generally it's not.
The best is just to pick them when they're young, so they're nice and juicy. And the older they get, they start unraveling and start becoming fibrous, so they start developing into their leaves.
The wild peach is one of those plants that everybody walks past and wonders, what is that fruit? Although it's not edible, it has some mystery behind it and some beautiful stories to tell. At the back in the old days, the folk used to believe by touching this tree it was a sense of energy and could also attract lightning. The wood of this tree is highly prized within South Africa and abroad, and is used for ornamental furniture, also known as the mahogany, the wildebeeste, or mkokokoko as the locals would call it. The seed pod itself separates into 5 capsules, and within those there's little red seeds that are black, and surrounded is a gel membrane. That membrane around those black seeds, the color extract from that can be used for paintings, for color fragments, which has a beautiful yellow and orange pigment. This plant is predominantly found throughout Africa and majority Afro-montane forest and along coastal ravines. This tree is unique as it has a symbiotic relationship with certain species of butterflies, where the butterflies defoliate and eat the leaves, and the droppings it leaves behind helps the plant propagate new leaves and new shoots. Something very interesting and something good to watch at this time of year. Like all edible mushrooms, you also get poisonous mushrooms and also psychedelic mushrooms, and this is one mushroom that fits into all 3 of those categories. Number 1, it can become edible with boiling, and in Europe it is actually used in one of their traditional dishes where they actually boil it until the color becomes actually completely pale, and then they eat it with deer and rabbit or pheasant. From a psychedelic point of view, you know, a lot of people that believe that this mushroom has a lot of medicinal properties through its psychedelic processes, and these can be dried and eaten into small quantities into microdosing, which are also used to reset your brain. So it's something very interesting to research and to look further into from a medicinal point of view. But then obviously from a poisonous point of view, consuming these mushrooms can be pretty fatal, and you could land yourself up in hospital as well. Probably ending up on a dialysis machine, having your stomach pumped. But one of those mushrooms is rather more pretty to look at, and obviously to consume or to actually try and go into start eating. This mushroom, when you read many fairy books, it's one of those mushrooms that always pops up, because it's always believed that the authors of those books were on these mushrooms when they were writing those stories, getting the creativity that they did. But yeah, a lovely friend of the forest. This mushroom, the reason it's got its name as the fly agaric, because on top of the mushroom on the ridge you've got these little white warts, and those contain the spores, and the flies are attracted to them. So you'll notice the flies will come and obviously land on top of them, take the spores, and obviously spread it. That included a couple other insects as well. This mushroom generally doesn't get eaten, but you might find 1 or 2 bite marks on it from something that's testing the edibility to see what mushroom it is. But generally the whole mushroom won't be consumed, and they're generally fruit to their full life scale. These mushrooms get pretty big. You're looking up to about 30-45 centimeters in diameter of the cap. So they can get really, really big. Very impressive, very beautiful, but obviously there are certain things that make it very different to other mushrooms that you can eat safely.